To Ffres. Sorry.
There we are.
Welcome to Ffres. This is the Wales Festival of Veg that goes on from June the 5th to the 18th, and it's coordinated by Food Sense Wales. And Food Sense Wales exists to promote and change the way that people eat in Wales. Today we have with us Stephen Terry. Steve, it's great to see you. Just a little bit of background on Stephen for those who don't know. Stephen started out in London. He was at Harvey's with Gordon Ramsay, working under Marco Pierre White. He then became head chef at the Canteen, where he won his first Michelin star. Went to France, worked for Alain Passard, amongst others. Interesting veg connection there. And then came back to the UK and opened Coast for Oliver Payton before eventually coming to Wales, where obviously his heart always should have been, where he is now at the Hardwick, the much celebrated and wonderful Hardwick, as chef patron. Actually, Steve, before we start talking about things veg, I think given the hospitality trade and its current challenges, we should just have a quick update on where you are in the soap opera that is now our life in hospitality. How are things?
Yeah, things are good, busy, obviously open up to great influx and lots of just demand, really. Obviously people have not been allowed to go out, so obviously, if you're in hospitality, you're going to be flat out at the moment. I mean, and we're coming into summer, the weather's it's good, so it's all looking good at the moment. The one problem that we all have is the staff shortages, and the industry has changed dramatically. I mean, it's on its knees, to be honest. Fortunately for us personally, we're okay. I mean, I could do with another chef. But we closed as per last year. After coming out of lockdown last year, we decided to close Sunday evenings and Mondays and Tuesdays, and we stuck with that. That way we can achieve much better consistency with the staff that we have. And, we're not working people into the ground, too much. I mean, they're long days, but at least there's some respite. Like today and tomorrow, I know that, I'm in work, but I mean, it's my choice, and it's I'm not under the pressure of two services and, every day. But generally, it's a pleasure to be back. We've missed out on so much. I mean, I know, look, it's a very serious issue that what's been happening is the whole global pandemic, but we also got reasons to be here and what we do. And this is what I do. And, having missed out on, we've got the end of the asparagus season, which has been fantastic, but just all those lovely Italian bitter leaves we missed out at the beginning of the year. Look, it all pales in comparison to the, or thousands and thousands of people sadly passing away from this pandemic. But, there's nothing I can do about that. It's what, I can only do what I do. And what I do is focusing on, seasonal produce, and that brings me a lot of joy in my life, and throughout the year as the seasons change and brings, new opportunities, so yeah, looking forward to the rest of the year. And I think, if you dig deep and you work hard, you'll stay good throughout the year. It won't be just a flash in the pan because people have been cooped up. People will come back because you're serving, quality produce, quality food, reasonably priced, accessible, and and people are getting value for money. Value for money, as we know, doesn't mean cheap. It just means value for money. Things can be expensive in value for money because depends how you view the product or the item in question. But generally speaking, we're all good, thank you.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting thing you bring up, actually, because I forget now how long we've been open in Wales throughout the last year, but it's a small proportion of the available time. So we've missed a whole year of seasons in many ways, haven't we?
Yeah.
I feel the same about you, is that we're getting, we've had the first strawberries through from Blind Camel, which is, always an important time of the year for us. The first new potatoes from them as well. So it's really good to be back in the swing of all that. How do you feel about, I mean, you've been involved in, you've been cooking in restaurant kitchens for 3 decades, I'd like to remind you. And how do you feel the role of veg has changed, or has it changed? And I think it's particularly interesting that you were with Alain Passard in Paris. That would have been in, what, the early 90s?
It was there, and golly gosh, hang on. Yes. Mid, was it not? Yeah. So it's when he was still cooking with meat and fish before he went vegetarian, with vegetables. So, but again, you generally find that people's creative people, if you're creative, you're creative. You can do anything with anything. But, you know, in terms of food and cooking, the creativity seems to sort of be more prevalent in the vegetables as opposed to the protein, because, you know, with the protein, you get some amazingly dry aged, blah, 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 Himalayan salt, Wagyu beef, blah, 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 beef, whatever. So you don't need to do anything. It's how you cook it. Okay, you cook it however you choose to cook it. But then, so that's that, really. It's what you choose to do with it. Now, again, there's the philosophy is forever changing and forever, it's so subjective. You can take an ingredient, a vegetable, and you can do all sorts of things to it. Or you can, as I like to sort of refer to it more so as the kind of river cafe philosophy, which is more of a philosophy that I sign up for. You know, if you find an ingredient that is as good as it's going to get, and when it's in peak of its season, then you probably need to do very little to it, because, you know, it's all there for you. If you feel compelled to be able to have to make it into shapes and sizes and do something, then that's fine, because there's room in this industry for everyone to do that kind of fine dining or whatever. But for me, it's all about, you know, I showcase things. That's what I do. You know, if I was clever, I probably wouldn't be working 18 hours a day, you know, in a kitchen in year 16, you know, do you know what I mean? So I'd probably be working, spending more time with my family, had a bundle of cash in the bank, and don't work weekends. But hey ho, it is what it is, you know, and I'm quite, you know, quite happy. But I like being creative. But to me, being creative isn't just about shapes and sizes. And, you know, sometimes some of my guys, they show me things on Instagram, and it is, there are websites for everything, you know, the whole foodie thing out there. And it's like, it is art on a plate. It's ridiculously arty, but it's like, you know, first of all, it'd be cold when you've got it, and it's too much, you know, effort. But, you know, it's there because it exists, and there's an audience for it. For me, you know, the art is knowing what not to do to something, or how to lift it very slightly, knowing when to add a little bit of vinegar into a pomodoro sauce, or a, you know, papilla pomodoro soup or something, just to lift those tomatoes a little bit. We all know that the best friends the tomatoes are ever going to have in the world is salt and vinegar. You know, that's why panzana salad is so incredibly great. So it's getting amazing. You know, we're using incredibly good, you know, heritage tomatoes. So, and it's appreciating it. You know, it's like I say, it's so subjective, and I think it's what I do for a living. So obviously, naturally, I can talk about it, and it you know, it's something that's my life. But for people who have, you know, do other things in life but like cooking, it's helping them to understand that you don't need to do a lot to a quality product. The best, not the hardest part, but it's sourcing the product. So that's where this festival is celebrating, you know, the you know, amazing produce of Wales, and making people aware of where these products are and how to get them. We all know there's farmers markets, so it's finding out where your local farmers markets are, and you know, and incredibly, you know, like, you know, Wright's, you know, is an absolute beacon, you know, of quality and incredible produce for anyone within a 50-mile radius to go and source incredible products. And, you know, it's just a little bit too far for me. So, but you know, occasionally we pass by, as you know, but, you know, I'd be there every day if I could. You know, people are so fortunate to have what on your doorstep. And I kind of like to do that here, but it's too much of a change for people to get their head around here. You know, we don't have that space to turn into a, you know, as you have that sort of retail kind of space. We just don't have.
I think that is a really interesting point, because when lockdown came the first time around, Marianne and I talked about it, and of course none of us knew it was going to go on as long as it did. So we thought we might, you know, we were kind of thinking, well, okay, if we've got to close for a few months, you know how intense this business is. Marianne cooks every day, you know, and we sort of saw it as an opportunity maybe to sit back a little bit and reflect for a few weeks.
Yeah.
Almost immediately, we started talking to Peter Seggers at Blind Camel, and, you know, we were also aware that they were going to lose all their routes to market. And so we changed what we did to have a lot more fresh produce available on our click and collect.
Yeah.
We've got that in the shop. And that's been just a huge thrill, and I think a reminder to us of exactly what you've been talking about, which is that if you get the right quality, it's you know, veg just stands up on its own anyway, and why wouldn't it? it's still, I wonder about it in respect to the public, you know, and how many people, when they get that, you know, if they're having a dish that's meat and 2 veg, you know, or fish and 2 veg or whatever, because we all still tend to serve a lot of those things still because of public expectation to a degree. But do they, you know, how many of the public do you think, hopefully a lot, but realise, say, my God, this isn't an ordinary carrot, you know, because I think sometimes their focus is on, if you give people a lovely piece of fish, their focus is on that. Is their focus on the broad beans, the wonderful peas, or, you know, whatever, as much as it should be. And I think the other thing is that you mentioned that's really important is that the creativity that's involved with veg, not necessarily in having to overwork what you do with it, but just to think more about the combinations and the possibilities, isn't it?
The thing is, you know, when so, you know, I don't cook from recipe books because I don't need to. You know, if it's pastry, then I'll probably Google something if I want to, because pastry is more of a science. But in terms of, you know, starters and, you know, I don't need to do that. But, you know, for people to have some inspiration, you know, there are some great books for people that are, you know, like Ben Tish's new book has just come out, which is A Love Letter from Sicily. Amazing, absolutely amazing. Yeah. Very simple. You know, it's fine. It's been inspired, and I think, you know, yesterday on Saturday we had the lovely Joyce Watkins, who is she grows up the road from us, you know, and she's a lady of a certain age, you know. She's probably, you know, same age as my mum, knocking on, you know, 80, and she's a daughter, and she turns up in her little car unannounced. Always a pleasure to see her. She had a tray of beautiful gooseberries and a box of broad beans, you know, and I was like, yes, before she said anything. Yep, lovely. Where do I sign? And then on the menu yesterday, we just had, you know, we had sourdough, just char-grilled sourdough, smashed broad beans, bit of chili, anchovy optional, garlic, and just smashed them up on the bruschetta, some buffalo mozzarella, some parmesan, good olive oil. Amazing. Oh, amazing. Just so delicious.
Yeah, I think that was what was lovely about your book that came out a few years ago, Inspired By, because I think that it is exactly that feeling, isn't it? We have people rock up, you know, with their stuff the same way here. You know, William Wilkins with his rhubarb, etc., etc. And you know, some of that we do through barter as well, which is lovely, you know, to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And it's you're right. It's kind of, and I suppose the way that we feel about that in a restaurant sense is the way that you hope the public will get to feel. Probably already, some do already, but instead of going out to do your shop based on preconceptions of a recipe that you've read in a book, it's about being able to pick up. Hang on a minute, you know, we're in a farm shop here. We're in a local shop, and there's something fresh from the area because it's seasonal.
Yeah.
You want to, you know, the question is, it's that way round, isn't it? It's that inspiration that drives you.
You kind of want to, you know, the passion that the people that grow our wonderful fruit and veg, the passion they have, you know, it's just nice to think that the person at the end of that chain, who's actually the consumer, you know, has some kind of appreciation. That's why they've chosen to buy that product, because they appreciate the effort that's gone into it, and they don't mind paying. Maybe it's a little bit more, maybe it isn't, you know, not always doesn't mean it's going to be more expensive, but maybe it is a little bit. But it's like, for instance, you know, I always supported Hallamon, which, you know, I think they're fantastic. And then the Pembrokeshire sea salt people started up, and we support them now because, you know, Hallamon's got a lot of support. You know, it's £1 a kilo and more expensive. So, you know, it's like, but, you know, we support them because it's fantastic product. So it goes back to think, you know, that it's value for money is value for money. You know, what price do you put on what you're putting inside you, what you're consuming, your well-being, you know?
Yeah, we should talk a little bit more about it. But just before that, I want to mention Alan Passard again, because I always just think it's remarkable. His journey is quite remarkable in terms of, you know.
I'm not his favourite person, by the way.
Huh?
I'm not his favourite person.
You're not his favourite person. Why are you not his favourite person?
Because I had no choice but to leave. I handed my notice in, and because I'd spoken to Oliver had been over with this really cool meeting with Mark Newson and Oliver at Mark's office in Paris, and because he was the designer of the interior of Coast and everything, and then before I started at Arpege, I did a trial there, and I thought it was a trial shift, and they said, yeah, you start in the morning, and I was like, and I was staying with my girlfriend's sister and brother-in-law, which is just south of Paris, and I was like, well, and I was going back the next day to have an interview with Oliver about coming on board to do Coast, etc., etc. So I made up this story. They said, look, I need to go back to London. I'm going back to London tomorrow to go and get some stuff, to move to Paris. They were like, right, okay, well, we'll see you in a couple of days. I was like, okay. So I went back, had the interview with Oliver, and he's like, yeah, done deal. Let's do this. And then we had a meeting a couple of months in Paris later. So when it came to sort of Oliver saying, right, Coast is happening, we're going to send you to America on a research and development trip in the new year. We need you to sort of be on board sort of like from January. I gave them a couple of months notice at Arpege, and the guy wouldn't accept my notice. I was like, so not Alan, but his working head chef, who was actually younger than me, but he'd been there 3 or 4 years. He was very, very accomplished. And he's like that, no. And I'm like, and then we were all French speaking. And I tried to explain to him my broken French that it's quite not how it works. I make the decision. I can't. I said, look, another opportunity's come up, and they're like, no, you need to stay. And I'm like, yeah, it doesn't work like that. So, and then one day it was just this one day, and Alan Passar came in, and I was on a 2-man section with this Danish girl on the larder, and we did this thing. We used to have this rosemary, very finely chopped, fresh every day, and it was for this lobster dish with this very thinly sliced radish and this sweet and sour dressing. It was a beautiful dish, beautiful, very Alan Passar. And it wasn't unfresh, and he went bananas. He made us all stay in the afternoon and everything. And I said to the guys, I said, look, I'm going to leave. I got to leave. They're not going to let me leave. So today's the day. I'm just going to go. I left. Some guy used to use my knife. I said, you can have the knife, blah, blah, blah. So, and I just had to go, just they never had no option. So I kind of walked out. I've never done it before in my life, but so, and a couple of months later, someone who I knew this lady who went to see him about something, and my name came up. She thought I was still there, and he was like, he wasn't very happy. I'm sure he's forgotten all about it now. But he was lovely man.
But
really cool guy.
The way that he does his menus now, the whole thing of moving to vegetarian, but he's moved away from that again now, hasn't he? A little bit, I think. But was a huge move, and but the way, to have those, what has he got? 2 gardens in the suburbs of Paris, and then basically the veg comes in the morning, and they don't write the menu until the veg arrives.
Yeah. I seen it on the one of him on Netflix.
On Chef's Table. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. He was lovely. He was, he was very passionate, and he, very rarely did he get upset. That was the one time, really. But he just used to used to fascinate me because, he was at a stage then. He was 2 stars then when I was there. And if I was, what would I have been? I would have been about 25, 26. So he would probably have been in his 40s, maybe, he's driving a Porsche, doing quite well for himself. And he used to come in, he had this Braggart jacket, obviously, and he had a big, long white apron that touched the floor. So it's like he floated in, you never saw his feet. I don't know. Has he got feet? I'm not sure. He used to come in, you just saw him float in and float out with his apron. It was weird like that. But he was really cool. And he would just stand on the pass. That was what he'd do, and just do things and tell you to whisk faster and that. But a lot of respect for him. A lot of respect.
But this, he kind of has his own gardens where he gets his veg from. Especially in cities, this is the issue around supply. I mean, how do you find it now compared to when you were in London? But also, you've been in Wales a long time now. Has it got? Yeah. Have you found more suppliers? Are there more people coming into the market? More people growing? Because it's not always been.
Not really. I mean, there's a chap that grows behind us, a Polish chap called Paul, who we've kind of lost contact with, and he's just behind us. We need to re-establish that contact. He fell out with one of my ex-members of staff, and I don't know what happened, but anyway, so we're gonna address that. I mean, we use Philip Jones, who's the local fruit and veg supplier, and they deal a lot with the growers. They deal with Joyce Watkins and etc. So if it's available, I get it through Phil and his son Alex. Well, it's Alex now really who runs it. So yeah, there's that element, and then we've got Amanda, who's just across the the border in Ross, we get the amazing Barbara Frassi from her. I'm going through like flipping bundles that way. I'll put it on everything. And I'm of that philosophy again, it's like asparagus. Asparagus is on about 3 or 4 things. Celebrate it while it's here, because it's going to be gone soon. The Barbara Frassi, man, that will go through the summer, which is quite good, and then it'll start to sort of get a bit woody, but that's amazing. I just love it. If people turn up with anything, I'm just, definitely. In terms of something a bit more Italian and stuff like that, I can do that through Alex, because they'll speak to people. The stuff's coming into Bristol or Birmingham, so we can get sort of, some of that Italian produce. But the more, on my doorstep, they're the people that are in touch with the growers. Yeah, I don't. People would say, like when you live in the country, oh, you haven't got time to wander around knocking people's door. You've grown anything. You have to go through the people whose job it is to do that, and they'll do the sourcing for you. But anything that's, I can get, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just a real joy. I mean, there's obviously things you're never going to get, like, citrus fruits and things like that. But I mean, when Pasquale, who sadly passed away year before last, he used to have a Tredillion farm. Best job I've ever tasted in my life, But things come to an end,
Yeah, I mean, that is so 2 things there, really. I mean, it seems to me that there is an opportunity for growers, definitely. And I think we're going to, I want to think positively about this. We're going to see a lot more growing in Wales. We're going to see a lot more mixed farming. We need, people need access to land to be able to grow, but the potential for more fruit and veg to be grown in Wales, I think, is huge. The market obviously has to recognise the significance of that and pay a little bit extra, perhaps, for the freshness and the quality that you get. Yeah. But, both you and I are in a situation where we could take on a lot more, I think, from local growers, if it was available. But how do you feel about seasonality generally? I mean, and therefore, imports. How do you feel about, where do you draw the boundary on that? Because we're not going with lemons and olive oil, are we?
For me, I mean, I always cook and work within like the close European season. So, I'll have raw beans and peas and asparagus, not asparagus, I just stick to the Wye Valley because it's on our doorstep. And I wouldn't dream of getting any of the South American stuff. I mean, it's not rubbish, it's because if you live in South America, it's local produce and it's probably lovely, but flying it over here for that Peruvian asparagus is not what I'm into. But yeah, so when you get the early Spanish and Italian raw beans and peas, that's all good. But yeah, generally, when strawberries, when they're in, and when they're out, that's it. I don't want them for O'Driscoll's from California. They look amazing, but they don't taste much, to be honest with you. I mean, do they actually taste so much over there? I mean, they don't lose flavour flying over, do they? I think they're just pumped out, aren't they? It's a big concern.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I mean, again, it's always very difficult to kind of be empirical about these things, isn't it? What is it that makes the great flavour? Is it the way that, is it the way that it's grown, the speed that it's grown? Yes, it is.
Yeah, combination. I mean, the sun, we had some strawberries and they were nice, but they just need a little bit more sun on them. It's just missing a tiny bit of sweetness, just a little bit. Well, we're fortunate. We've got, the Chins are on our doorstep and over, huge producers, and it's good gear. I mean, I know they supply, quality supermarkets, Marks and Spencer's, whatever. But it's like, so, at the end of the day, the raspberries are good. The asparagus is amazing. The forced rhubarb, they're good. So yeah. I'm very happy with that.
I mean, you remember a few years ago when all those strawberries were stolen in Kent somewhere, and the big worry was not so much the fact that £10,000 worth of strawberries had been stolen, but actually they were in danger of poisoning people because, the residue of the pesticides hadn't had long enough to dissipate. So. Yeah. That's a very, very different kind of growing, isn't it? And you've mentioned earlier about value. I mean, stuff that we buy for Blind Camel, for instance, it isn't always more expensive. And Peter Seggers, who operates there, has a kind of philosophy of, he does check out supermarket prices and he tries to keep things, in the kind of in the reasonableness kind of. Within reasonable parameters as far as price are concerned, but it is that big question, isn't it? One carrot is not the same as another carrot, so it's weird that we do that with food in general, vegetables in particular, where we'll kind of say, oh yeah, well, that's a better carrot, but I'm not prepared to pay much more for it. But with other things in life, I don't know, cars, for instance, we readily accept that there's a huge difference between buying a rubbish car or mediocre car and buying an extraordinary car. So we still have
people put a car gets made to be, so you pay your money, you make your choice. Food's going to make you feel full. You pay your money, you make your choice. Do you want that, that journey in that car to be quick, if it's because you've invested in a car that goes quite quickly, looks nice and it's got a nice interior, or on the same vein with that ingredient, do you want it to taste nice, it's and be more beneficial on a sort of the health benefits, but more so just taste of an amazing carrot. And it is funny when you say that about carrots. Carrots is a good example, isn't it? Because it's such a go-to example, because mass-produced carrots taste of nothing. We don't. You might grate it raw. Okay, it's got a bit of flavour then, but when you cook it, tasteless. But good heritage carrots, and they don't have to be different colours, but whether they are or not, but just the taste of a decent carrot when it's cooked is delicious. Like celery or something. Just, like even this onions, a nice white onion, a quality one, as opposed to something that's been sat in just delicious. Like it's that caper, with a bit of chili and the garlic. It's those things just, just that's flavor, that's really good. So yeah, even if it's a quality nice potato, you want something with it. You want something that enhances it, something that makes it more interesting. That's the point, isn't it? It's to make it a pleasure and more interesting to eat. And then you involve textures as well, because that makes it more interesting. For instance, I like, our vegetarian, we have one specific vegetarian main course. There are only 5 main courses anyway, so it's not like we're being tight, So, it's a lovely tomato risotto. I call it my ratatouille because I think there's 100 ways to make it, but we just basic ratatouille with a lovely Frankie's tomato sauce, that we cook from the Brooklyn restaurant, with some delicious salad leaves, broad beans and peas, buffalo mozzarella, barb de frati, asparagus, bit of black olive tapenade, and then if it's a vegan one, then we've got deep fried polenta. Well, actually, the risotto's vegan anyway, but I like polenta as well, because polenta is one of those vehicles, isn't it? It's it's maize. It's like potatoes for Northern Italians, isn't it? So they call them the polentoni, don't they? Well, the Southerners call the Northerners polentoni, but when you deep fry it, it's interesting. It's nice. It's a nice texture. When you can either flavour it at Parmesan or just whack all the flavour on top. But yeah, I think when you go into the vegan world, and which I don't delve in too deeply, but if you've got like tofu, tofu is water's got more flavour than tofu. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's when you need heavy spicing and stuff like that, and it becomes a texture with spice, which is okay. Marinate it and stuff like that. But no, it's funny. People view vegetarian food as there's 2 different schools, isn't there? There's the school of what can we turn this into? That's what I call and without, in no disrespect to anybody, that's what I call the what do you call it? Nut loaf or something? What is it? What's that? Sorry,
nut roast.
Yeah, nut roast. It's you're creating something that's pretty contrived, really. For the sake of it's a vegetarian dish, or do you just get the bunch of most amazing seasonal produce, cook it beautifully, and put it on a plate? That would be my go-to, because that's it's like, well, but eat vegetables, or if you just or pescatarian with a nice bit of fish. But I don't look at vegetables and think I've got to create something for a vegetarian. What can I turn it into? It's like, no, that's it. That is it.
I must admit, I find the whole thing of trying to turn it into meat a bit weird, more than a bit weird.
Veggie burger, that oxymoron.
There's actually no need to go down that route unless you're just, I suppose, trying to reproduce the the flavor and texture of meat without actually using meat, which is not possible in my view. And it's very strange. I mean, I stood behind clearly a vegan guy in a supermarket not long ago, and it was obviously vegan by what it was buying, but most of it was processed, and it wasn't things that I would have wanted to eat. And I found that really kind of sort of disappointing. But again, that really points to the fact that, you get there to people can't, have fallen out of the habit of cooking, and don't have the basic skills of cooking in their heads.
Exactly that.
And actually, to this whole debate, I mean, the ability to use more vegetables is reliant on some basic ability to cook and some confidence in the kitchen, isn't it?
Yeah. And
there's questions here, Steve. I better go to those before we finish. Have you had much impact, or have you seen much impact from Brexit on fruit and veg supplies? And of course, it's been covered up a bit by COVID, hasn't it? Because I think when it was at its problems were at their peak earlier in the year, there were some really severe problems with our suppliers, for sure.
We've had some of the dry products, but not so much. The fresh stuff, not so much. But most of it is indigenous anyway, so we're not sort of getting stuff from, I don't know. Sort of, I don't know what. We get lemons and we stuff like. But some of the dry goods, there's been some weird sort of like bizarre shortages. Like red wine vinegar, and people are holding salted anchovies and things like that. From coming from Spain and things like just that kind of stuff. But no, not really. I mean, the biggest impact staff, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like we already had moved to a position, and it's been a gradual thing, really. We're using so much local supply. We don't buy very much from outside the UK at all. And then the mainstay is whatever we can get locally at any one time. So we haven't had that kind of impact. But I mean, I suppose it does raise the question of the opportunities going forward. And we could certainly, I'm sure there is still a huge latent market amongst the hospitality trade for more local veg. But you're right. You mentioned it earlier. It's there is that. It's difficult, especially at the moment with no staff available, to go out and search those things out. So routes to market are really important, and perhaps once we get a stronger base of growers, we may also get more cooperation amongst growers as well.
Absolutely.
Together. Another thing that's been mentioned, I used that car analogy in terms of value for money, but the other thing is that the stuff that tastes good. I have a strong belief in this. This is where nature sort of outstrips the science, doesn't it? The common sense outstrips the science. Stuff that tastes really good is going to be better for you nutritionally as well. I mean, the reason is your body's recognizing that there's more good stuff in there. So, you eat a tasteless carrot, I can assure you, though without the empirical evidence, that it's not as nutritious as a carrot that tastes delicious. Yeah. And that's the other part of the value equation, as well as the inputs in terms of the impact on climate change as well. So, there's an awful lot of good reasons to want to see more veg on the plate, and more local veg in particular. One thing I wanted to ask you before we do wrap up, because one of the things that often comes out of these conversations is how do we get children to eat more veg? And it's one of the things in the conversations that I often have about schools, school lunches in particular. Yeah. Like, well, we could put more veg on the menu, but they're not going to eat it. Some of the people on the call here, and definitely Food Sense Wales with their Peas Please campaign, have worked really hard on all this. You've got kids, they're nearly adults now, but what's your experience been?
I find that if you just put veggies on, I mean, everything's changed in the last 4 weeks. We've gone back to that horrible, like, no one sees me sort of like 5 days a week, and so that dysfunctional lifestyle, which I'm not entirely happy about, and would like to sort of resolve that. But during lockdown, it was great. Most days I would cook, and I'd cook something and we'd put it on the table, and you know, we'd have a couple of dishes, some of this, some of that, and the vegetables. And yeah, my kids aren't too bad actually. I mean, I don't force them to, but I say, well, try it, you know, try something. And it was nothing weird and wonderful. I mean, it was all quite pretty basic stuff. And the other thing I find is incorporating the vegetables into something, you know, like if I make a pasta dish, I'm big on making pasta dishes at home, like a big bowl of pasta. And I put stuff into it and risottos. And I love sort of like putting all the veg in there. You know, I'd always put all the sofritto, you know, the celery, carrot, onion, leek, bit of chili. And my kids do surprise me, actually. They like a bit of, some of them, you know, the anchovy thing sometimes with Olivia, but she's kind of got her head around that now. But yeah, I like, if I like making tomato sauces and things like that. But I always put like a good stuff veg. There's plenty of veg and everything, you know. I like getting my thing. So I always do a pasta dish or a risotto. I think that works better than having you know, sort of you know, sort of three different sizes of vegetables. I mean, with a Sunday roast, then you'd have sizes of veggies and stuff like that. Make a nice cauliflower cheese, you know, do some broccoli or you know, something like that. Maybe add asparagus, do things. Yeah, whatever's available. I'll sort of see what I can get, you know, what's seasonal. It's an education as well, because I like to sort of teach them as well. Different. We're using kohlrabi at the moment on one of the dishes, and there'll be some kohlrabi like being eaten tonight at home. Got some skate, so some Pembrokeshire new potatoes, and a bit of kohlrabi. Delicious.
That's a good note to end on. What you're going to have for supper tonight on your alleged day off when you're actually in the Hardwick.
Well, I've got a night off. I have 2 nights off a week. The days, well, the kids are in school. I mean, I've got stuff to do. So I mean, nice being here on my own, if I'm honest. So it's nice.
Really appreciate your time, Stephen, and thanks for contributing to this first session in Ffres, the Wales Festival of Veg, yeah, I think we can. You know, I think we both look forward to what the seasons are going to bring coming forward, and hopefully to a lot more people growing veg within Wales as well.
Yeah, I do. One of the things I'm most looking forward to doing, which I haven't done yet, which will be in a couple of months, summer pudding.
Yeah,
looking forward. I love with sourdough and summer pudding, and some Niljar creamery creme fraiche.
Sounds amazing. I'll be there. Okay.
Right.
Very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Cheers, Steve.
Take care.